All right, how is everybody doing? I am Jeremy Langlois, Executive Chef here at the beautiful Homeless House Estate and Gardens. Thank you for scrolling through, stopping, and checking us out. Sure hope everybody is doing great out there. Well, guys, a bunch of things are going on here at Homeless House. You know, we all know this Sunday is Easter, and if you haven't made your Easter reservations here at Homeless House and you plan to, please don't hesitate. We still have spots, but we are filling up fast, and we would love to have you. Go to homelesshouse.com, and you can find out information all about our Easter buffet. With that being said, the dish we are doing today is we're doing something a little bit different. I've been looking forward to this date all year. I kind of thought I would do this dish, but there's only one day that really makes sense for me to do this dish. So the dish we're doing today is green gumbo, or also known as Gumbo Z'herbes. And this is a dish that has existed forever, but was made iconic by Leah Chase. And if you don't know who Leah Chase is, let me just take 1 second to tell you about Leah Chase, and then we'll jump in and cooking. Leah Chase, you know, in England, they have their queen. And here in Louisiana, in New Orleans, we have our queen. I actually just happened to, I have two pictures hanging in our kitchen at Homeless House, and I happen to just pull this off the wall because it's Leah Chase hangs on our wall and Chef John Fultz hangs on our wall. I call it our wall of legends, and Leah is definitely someone deserving to be on that spot. If you don't know, she was the person who opened the restaurant Dooky Chase in New Orleans all the way, I believe, back in the, I might have my timeline off, but in the 50s. Dooky Chase became a restaurant that was at the center of the civil rights movement of the time. All the civil rights leaders, from Martin Luther King and Jesse Jackson and everyone that we learned about, all actually started meeting at Dooky Chase, planning at that time, which was the Baton Rouge bus boycott, which would later grow on to be the big movement that would eventually move over to Selma, Alabama. And all this happened right here at Dooky Chase's. But take that aside, just Leah Chase in herself is just an absolute Louisiana legend here in Louisiana, and the restaurant itself is an absolute legend. And their biggest day of the year is actually Holy Thursday, the day before Good Friday. Today's Holy Thursday. And if you were to dine at Dooky Chase's on Holy Thursday, they're going to feed about 600 people, and you're going to come and get some Gumbo Z'herbes and some fried chicken. And I actually had the honor of cooking for Leah. Oh, this would have been a long time ago. I believe around 2004 for Leah's 80th birthday. So that's something that I'll always have, is something that I got to cook for her and her family for her 80th birthday. It was an absolute honor for me. I've got to work side by side with her all the way up until recent years. I was in this kitchen, standing right here, where she's right here, working side by side with her, helping her fill up oyster patties. It's something that I will always cherish. And her legend, it continues to go on. If you've ever seen something like, say, for example, the great Disney movie that takes place in New Orleans, The Princess and the Frog, well, the producer, John Lasseter, who's dying here at Homeless House, actually based the Princess Tiana on a young Leah Chase. So just absolute legend, and Leah, we honor you today with this recipe. Thank you. So let's go ahead and go into it. So green gumbo, guys. Now, traditionally, green gumbo would be something served, because the Catholic religion is so huge in Louisiana, we take Lent very seriously, so no meat on Friday. So you would eat green gumbo on Friday. However, like everything we do here, at some point we wind up putting the meat back into it. We always cook everything with lots of pork and sausage and this, that, and other, and that's the version we're going to be doing today. So before I start throwing stuff in a pot, because really, this dish is insanely simple. You throw it in a pot and you cook it. You just boil it. I want to go over what we're working with here, and then we'll get into it. We're starting off with a multitude of greens. Leah, I believe, made her Gumbo Z'herbes with 5 or 6 different greens. If you go to and follow our recipe, also found on homelesshouse.com, the greens we're using today, we have spinach, cabbage, collard greens, turnip greens. This is watercress. And these are all just different greens that we've taken. And whenever you'll see we have them by the bunch. So here's an example. We buy our mustard greens. This is a bunch of mustard greens right here. We would take that out, coarse chop it, throw all these greens into a colander, and then we would rinse them 2 or 3 times to really get out any dirt or grit that you might find there. And that's what we have here. Just all these greens, the cabbage we just cut up, The spinach we left whole. The mustard greens, after we rinsed them, we chopped them down, rinsed them off real well. Over here in my black iron pot, I got a gallon of water boiling, and I'm going to just start putting these grains into the pot. Like always, y'all, at any point you have any questions, please feel free to drop a comment into our Facebook page, and we'll try to answer them live on air if we see them. But if not, don't worry about it. We're watching the feed throughout the week, and if we see it, I love interacting with y'all, and we'll answer them as we go. But we're just going to get those grains in here, and now we're going to just start to cook them. Now, you almost kind of have to like force these greens into the pot because it's a lot of greens. And what happens with anytime you're working with spinach, greens, leafy greens, they wilt as they cook. So you have this big volume of it, but just a little bit of heat to them will cause them to just cook down and shrink and get smaller. And that's, so whenever you start off, we have a bunch of greens, but as it gets into that hot water, it'll instantly start to shrink down and wilt down and cook, and you just kind of stir it in and they'll start to come into the pot. And that's exactly at the spot that we're out here. And now we're at a point where we just want to cook this for about 30 minutes. Just let this come up to a boil, reduce the heat down to a simmer, let that simmer away for about 30 minutes. And I'm going to move this to the side because that's exactly what we have here. Let me spoon some of this out so you can see it. But here, we've taken all those greens. We've thrown a little bit of onion, a little bit of garlic in here as well. So we're going to put some more in there. A little garlic, that's onion, a little bit of garlic, and just continue to just cook this down. The beautiful thing about this dish is it's throw it in the pot, boil it for a long time. So that's what we're at here. After the greens have gotten good and wilted and the onions start to cook and the garlic starts to cook, you have a couple options. If you look at our recipe, what the recipe tells you to do is strain this, reserve the liquid, then throw the greens in a Cuisinart or food processor and grind them up, and then come back into the pot with it. But if you haven't, I would suggest really something that's going to make your life easier to have a good little hand blender or immersion blender. And that's what I'm going to do is just, instead of having to strain it, I'm just going to go ahead and just start chopping it up right in here with this blender. So let's go ahead and do that. Now the reason we want to chop this up is twofold. A, because we're dealing with different shaped grains here, they're not going to fit on the spoon because this is a soup. And if the greens are cut up too big, they won't fit on the spoon, so just chopping them up is going to help so much. But also, through pureeing these greens, it's also going to act a little bit as a thickener for the soup as well. Those greens will get all pureed in here, and that will start to thicken up the soup as well. I love this recipe because it's such a different take. With this green gumbo, it's such a different take on gumbo. And it's just something that is just absolutely unique. So you can see here, I'll label some up in a second, but you can see after running this hand blender for just a minute in here, it's really started to chop all those greens up. Let me show you what that looks like here. See that? It's gone from just being kind of coarse to now it's a little more pureed. Now what we want to do, now this would be a classic Gumbo Z'herbes, and you could serve it, season this up and serve it like here, but we're going to add some meat with it. I see Jesse has a question. What you got, Jesse?
Yeah, on the recipe that we put online, it says 2 bunches of turnips, but is it just the greens and not actual turnips, or do you use the turnips?
Oh, turnip greens, and let's talk about that as well. The beautiful thing about this recipe is super adaptable. So like, let's say you couldn't find turnip greens or collard greens, but you could find mustard greens or spinach. Just substitute one or the other out. The more you have, the better, because it just gives you a variety of the different flavors. Each green has its own different flavor profile. Watercress is very peppery. You get different flavors from each one, but you could very easily, let's say you only have 1 bunch of spinach. We'll just add a bunch of mustard greens, and vice versa. You can mix and match. So let's talk about the meats that I'm going to add into here now. Now the meats are going to add a lot of good flavor. So I have some diced ham here, and I have 2 types of sausages. I have just a traditional smoked sausage, and then Leah would always like to put hot sausage in her Gumbo Z'herbes as well. And this is like a spicy smoked Louisiana sausage. You see it's a little bit reddish. It's because there's a lot of paprika. Think of it almost like a chorizo style sausage, but a Louisiana style chorizo sausage. So I'm going to add all that good meat into here. Again, if you wanted to keep it vegetarian, you would have just seasoned it at the point we were at before. But we're going to add this meat, and now again, we're just going to let this cook away. Give it another 30 minutes to an hour of just simmering away, and what that's going to do is allow all those beautiful smoked meats and all those grains to start to marry and have all their flavors come together, and it's going to be something that is just beautiful. All the flavors really come together. I got a couple herbs here. Actually, I got some thyme. Now with thyme, all I do is I just peel the leaves right off of the stalk itself or the stem of the herb. You wouldn't want to put that stem in there. It's a little bit too fibrous, but the leaves is where all the flavor is. You don't have to chop them up. I'm just taking a thing of thyme, running my fingers through it to get the leaves off of it, stripping it from the stem, and that's perfect. That's exactly all we need. I'm going to come back and season it. I'm going to add just a couple dashes of hot sauce, some black pepper. If you wanted it more spicy, more hot sauce would be what you would want to add at this point, and some cayenne pepper instead of black pepper would be great, and of course some salt as well. So that your salt and your pepper, get all of that in there. And again, this is very simple. Just let that cook away. When we're ready to serve this, of course, we got our bowl right here. I actually have some gumbo filet. You can add the gumbo filet in now, but I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with the gumbo filet. I'm going to go ahead and scoop up some of this gumbo z'herbes. Well, let's talk about the pronunciation. That can be a controversial thing. My mentor, Chef John Foles, he pronounced it Gumbo Z'herbes, but Leah, she pronounces it Gumbo Z'herbes. So however Leah pronounces it, sorry, Chef, but that's what I'm going with. I'm going to go with Gumbo Z'herbes. So we're just gonna dump some of that in there. Of course, like any gumbo, we're gonna serve that with some rice. So I'm gonna put some rice right on top. And then I'm gonna sprinkle some of this gumbo filet right on top of the rice, almost as a little bit of a garnish. Now, what gumbo filet is, it's something that we use here in Louisiana, not all the time, but sometimes, it's a flavor enhancement. It can be a thickener for gumbo, but what it is it's actually ground sassafras leaves. Sassafras is the same thing used in making root beer, and that's something that we put right in our rice here for our gumbos. But there it is, guys. It's such a simple dish because all you have to do is get everything you need for it, put it in the pot, and just cook it and cook it and cook it down. And then at the end, come back, and that's when you want to taste it for your seasoning. If you want it spicy, more pepper, more hot sauce. But other than that, that is all you need. Well, again, check out our Hummus House website. There you can find our recipes. Again, you can find information on our Easter buffet coming up. Also Mother's Day as well. That's coming up in those 3 weeks. Other than that, that's the dish. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week. Bye for now.